Hooray. I'm so happy to be with you, Bill. I'm so happy to be with all of you. I spent hours reading this wonderful book. I consumed myself in it. It reads like a coming of age novel. It brings this curious and complicated Bill Gates as a little kid to life, struggling to fit in, awkward at times, but ultimately so endearing and so extraordinary that I found myself rooting for you every step along the way.
Thanks.
It's fascinating for anyone of any age, whether you're a young person growing up or an old person looking back. It's relatable, instructive, inspirational. And I felt like it was an honest look at this kid who's become one of the most important, influential people in the history of our country. So let us begin. I'm so excited. It's different from anything. It's going to be. So, Bill, it's different from anything you've written before. And what was it like to delve into your childhood and your adolescence and relive those early years? Was it exciting? Was it fun? Was it scary?
It ended up being a lot of fun and even a bit revelationary. As you say, I like to look forward. My books are mostly taking whatever learning journey I've been on, say about climate or pandemics, and trying to share that or the magic of the digital revolution. And I always think, okay, I have a lot more to do. There's so many cool things that I want to focus on in innovation that whenever we've had anniversaries, I've been, okay, let's do that really quickly and get back to work. But this year, I turned 70, Microsoft turns 50, the foundation turns 25. And so, it was almost 5 years ago, I thought, okay, should I do an autobiography? And we were doing some research on it and not too happy with trying to cover the whole thing. And so it was 18 months ago, the idea of doing this first part came along. And that started to make sense. I felt like, okay, I can really talk about my mom and my dad and the couple of key friends. And, it was incredible to think back and remember, okay, my dad helped me here. I had incredible luck there, and just to honor how amazing a lot of these people around me were.
Did you learn a lot about yourself that you hadn't remembered or thought through?
There were a few things I had misled myself. I thought I got straight A's in ninth grade.
What, you get 1B?
Yes, I did.
Oh, no.
So I've been, it's all a myth. I've been making it up my whole life that, I exaggerated that. But, I'd completely forgotten that my dad wrote back to me when he decides not to become a federal judge because of the situation with his law firm. I was very sad because my dad was the perfect picture of how you would think of a judge, somebody who sits there and is always calm and thoughtful and really hears all the different arguments before making up their mind. And it really made me cry when I saw that note. It's amazing to me that it was kept all those years. Or, looking at my report on Delaware and saying, wow, that has been so helpful to me.
Tell me how many pages it was, the Delaware report.
170 pages. The other kids were turning in 5 to 10 page reports. And I was clueless. When I turned in, I was like, ooh, did I misunderstand this assignment? I think I went overboard.
Did you realize then there was something different about you that made little Delaware come to so many pages?
I knew I had a lot of energy. And so sitting still during the class was hard. It is confusing when I had a year where one teacher said I should be held back because I wasn't able to sit there very well. And another teacher said I should be pushed forward. So I said, hey, these people can't figure me out. That's must be a little tricky for my parents as well. So I knew that I had some deficits in terms of my social abilities, but I was a happy kid. This whole story, except for the one friend, I had an idyllic childhood. The parents, the place, the school. Everything about it was fun. And I was even nicknamed Happy Boy when I was young because
wow.
I had my energy, even though it was not very well directed, was mostly positive and optimistic.
Well, tell me about your grandmother, because I love the story about her. You'll see when you read about it that she's an unforgettable character. She gave you her most valuable resource, which was time. She gave you time. And they played thousands of card games together, and she won every single time until finally, and he figured she must have been born with some special gift. It came from above. She couldn't be doing this any other way. You finally figured out what she was doing. I love that story. It sort of tells the story of your life in a funny way with old Gammy.
Yeah, so my mom's mom, who we called Gammy, was widowed when I was about 5 years old. And so and my mom was an only child. So she was a huge fixture in our family, often greeting us as we came home from school when, particularly as my mom got more busy with community-related things and eventually actual corporate boards, Gammy really stepped up. And she read books to us. She played cards with us. I mean, it was a pretty fantastic deal. Now, she didn't let us win at cards. And it took me a while to realize, okay, there's some method that she's applying. And she wouldn't tell me explicitly, like, okay, 4 clubs have gone by only one time, and therefore you should, understand that state machine, and it should cause you to, play gin or rummy different ways. The games vary in terms of, how complex it is to have a perfect strategy. Bridge, which I've spent thousands of hours on, is sort of, as complicated as you want it to be. But some of these games, like
Did you even play Go Fish, those kind of games?
well, that was
that
pretty
beneath
simple.
you?
Their right strategy is pretty easy. But like sevens, Coast Guard rummy is I'd say medium complicated, how you think it through. But she was a bit chagrined when I finally started to win more than my fair share of the card game. She gave me a little bit of credit that okay, I had finally started thinking correctly.
But did it have to do with, did you have a photographic memory?
Um, the state machine involved is very small, so you don't need a gigantic memory. Most of these are single deck things, at most three decks. So it's just a matter of paying attention, and then it's kind of cool where you think, wow, is all of life like that? If you really study hard, is there kind of an understanding or explanation? And if you want to know something, you have to put a lot of time into it. But then when it comes time to make a decision, you'll have all that to draw on. And so it made me, it got me interested in math, I would say. And then I went from math to the software exposure that I got. So it was a pretty natural progression. But it really started with the kind of confidence I got that, oh, there's a secret here having to do with the optimal card playing strategy.
Wow. So here's even more interesting in the complex relationship that you had with your mom. You loved her and she loved you. You knew that. She was warm and open and social and talkative and very smart and very demanding of you. She had high expectations. I mean, she must have been so happy when you loved reading so much. She must have been so happy when you took every volume of the World Book Encyclopedia and read it. I would have loved that for my kid to do. But then, given how wildly smart you were, it was hard for her to accept that you weren't working hard, right, in school. And there were difficult days when you'd go without speaking to anyone, she said, and you'd only come out when you draw her out for meals. And there's this one point when she's trying to draw you out to talk to you, and you say, I'm thinking you should try it sometime. Whoa! And all this is before you're a teenager. And this incredible woman, tell me about what she did with you. I mean, she's amazing. With the hindsight of these years, do you understand more about your relationship with her?
Yeah, even when she was great at setting high expectations, but I have to say, it wasn't like when you met the expectations, then she'd be like, no, that's great.
Oh.
It'd be like, okay, fine. And some of it was very indirect. Like if other families were over at our house and after they left, they say, she'd say, oh, they must feel tough that their kids, went to community college and not, to a four-year college. And we'd get this, oh, okay. So there's these set of values that parents feel good about their kids when they do these things. I said to my mom, after I'd gotten into Harvard, you told me to go to Harvard. And she said, no, I didn't. And she's right. That sentence never was enunciated, but there was kind of a clear set of, okay, get into the hardest school you possibly can, where that would be a strong achievement. And so it was a very intense relationship. I mean, I stole time away from, my older sister a little bit because, I made things challenging. But it was kind of amazing because it really did push me forward. She was never that tough. It was mostly she operated through being a little bit disappointed and surprised. Things like, okay, put the ketchup in this thing and then you have to put it in here before you do this. I'd be like, I don't know if I get the logic of this. And she'd say, this is how it's done. So we always had quite a bit of back and forth.
And you write today that you might have been diagnosed then with autism or something on the spectrum. And so do you think that diagnosis would have made a difference for you or for your parents if they'd known that at the time?
I doubt there's anything in the end they could have done better than what they did. I mean, actually, they did send me to a therapist, which at the time was very unheard of. In fact, the other people who came to see the therapists were these couples who were having a hard time. So the person in the waiting room when I came in or when I came out were all couples, and he even gave me a little glimpse of what that was about, and he had me read Freud. He gave me these various tests.
You're only 9 years old at this time.
Yeah, but
read Freud, kid. Learn about the brain.
He was gaining my trust so that he could basically say to me that there was no glory in troubling my parents, that, telling them that their rules were arbitrary and that, they said, you need to respect us. And I'd say, well, why? He said to me, that it was anybody, it didn't take any cleverness. If you want to give your parents a hard time, you have the upper hand because they love you. And that's just not a sign of any good thing. And so he really did get me over a period of a couple of years after he'd gained my trust. He got me to kind of shift and see my relationship with them in a more friendly, cooperative light.
Yeah, I think what you wrote was he told you you're going to win in the long run. Of course, you're going to get the independence. And he told your parents he's going to win. So don't let love get lost along the way, which was a really smart. It gave you a new perspective on it, right? Even if you still had to fight for things and be rebellious, you knew what you were going through.
No, and I feel bad when I think back to how tough I was on my parents. So he was right. There was no value in that, but I did get past it.
You sure did. Tell me about your dad. I mean, when you mentioned that he wanted a judgeship, but he didn't take it because something was going on in his firm, it was character that he felt the firm was in a difficult position and he didn't want to leave it. That's an extraordinary thing when you reach something you really want, but you feel loyalty to where you are.
Now, my appreciation for my dad has grown, throughout my life. I mean, his natural values, even about diversity, women. I mean, he was ahead of his time on almost everything, and he was fairly unassuming. The example he set for me was this rational thinking. He was very busy, so the amount of time with him versus my mom was like 10 to 1, 20 to 1. He would leave early. We'd have dinner when he got home. At the dinner, we'd talk about various cases that he was working on, which were super interesting. And so it was utterly different than my mom, and yet, so valuable to kind of aspire to the kind of very, what he would call organized, rational way of thinking that he brought to everything.
No, he seems like a wonderful man. I wish I'd known him too. He just seemed amazing. So then at a certain point, they decided to send you to a different school, an exclusive school, Lakeside. And you didn't want to go, you said. You heard it was hard and they have to wear jackets later on. What a pain in the ass. And you thought you'd fail the entrance exam, but then somehow pride took over and you couldn't do it. Thank God, because it turned out to be just the right school for you, right? And why so?
Yes, that was a fantastic thing because this school had particularly good teachers. The class size was about 15 versus, say, 30 in the public school. Uh, the teachers, once they saw my kind of curiosity, they would give me a disproportionate amount of the time. And my kind of, hey, I don't care, I'm a goof off in everything but math. When I kind of tried that at this school, people were like, oh, maybe you're really dumb. It wasn't prestigious to make jokes. And, you know, the athletic people were cool, uh, but there wasn't kind of this goof off thing. And the person who became my friend there kind of said to me, how come you're being so lackadaisical? And so over a period of the first few years there, I go in 7th grade, and by the start of 9th grade, I've decided, okay, I really am going to apply myself, not just in math, but in the other subjects as well. And yeah, there were particular teachers that were very encouraging there, you know, 2 very important friends. And at the end of my 8th grade year, that's where a computer terminal.
Yeah, tell us about that, how that happened. This room, this special room, you ended up spending hours and nights in there.
Yeah, so it's hard to appreciate how expensive computers were. I mean, now, you know, people just have a computer on their desk and they let it sit there idle. In those days, there were only a few thousand computers in the country. And so if you could find one either to dial into it or actually use it late at night, that was a great treat. And so this Mothers Club, which had a rummage sale, allocated $2,000 for us to use this computer. And the teachers were pretty intimidated. And within a few months, there were only 4 of us that really just got obsessed with this thing. That's the computer terminal. That's Paul Allen, who you might not guess is only 2 years older than I am. Because he looks old and I look young. I'm 13 in that photo.
Wow.
And this became the thing that we were just saying, what can it do? And you know, every chance we got to use the computer, somehow that would come to an end, but then we would find another opportunity. And it's hard to overstate how unusual that was, because these were expensive and really just at some universities, big corporations, and the government.
So then you tell the story that you got so excited being in this room that you would climb out of your bedroom at night and then go and work on it in the middle of the night. And then you'd have to walk home or take a bus home like it's 2 a.m. That's an incredible amount of freedom. Did nobody know that you were doing this?
Eventually, well, my older sister was aware because I had to walk by her bedroom on the way out.
And she didn't tell on you?
No, she was actually pretty good about that. If she had done something wrong, I wouldn't have told on her. But she didn't do it much. So eventually they did become aware. And I have to say, that was an amazing thing writing this book. The degree to which they, even though they were very serious about parenting, would let me go on trips, you know, hiking trips, or being a page, which is a messenger boy back in the Congress in 1972, or my senior of high school. Although that, where I was taking time away from the high school, they did force me to meet with the headmaster and get the headmaster to say, hey, don't worry, he'll still be okay getting into college. So my parents allowed these things, including, I'm quite sure, knowing that I was going off and using this computer late at night and not standing in the way of that.
And of course, it's there where you meet these 2 people so important in your life, your friend Kent and then Paul Allen, who becomes your partner. Can you tell us about Kent? Because that was one of the most emotional parts of the story, to have a best friend like that and then to have such sad things happen.
Yeah, so as soon as I joined in 7th grade, my only social skill was talking to nerdy boys my own age, a little bit to adults. But anyway, Kent and I became best friends, and we'd talk every night. And he was a diligent student. He really was getting straight A's. And he had a very outward look that he was looking at the salaries of professors and ambassadors and generals and kind of thinking, okay, what are we going to do? And we're like, wow, don't we have time? Do we have to start thinking about this now? And he said, no, we need to read these biographies and think about this. He got me reading Fortune magazine, and very unusually, he'd carry a big briefcase around. He knew what was going on in politics. So, a wide range of interests, some of which overlapped with me, some of which did not. And he was one of the four. There's Kent and I, who are the younger, and then Paul and another person, Rick, who is a friend of his. The four of us, we called ourselves the Lakeside Programming Group. We're the ones who just couldn't get enough time down there. And in fact, by the time I'm in my junior of high school, the school's done something complicated, which is they merged with the girls' school. So up until 10th grade, it's all boys. Then my junior year, these girls show up. But anyway, it makes the scheduling very complicated because you have two campuses that are far away from each other. And they asked me to do this school scheduling. And at first I said, I'm not sure I know how to do that. So they had somebody do it very imperfectly one year. And then I figured out, okay, I know how to do that. So Kent and I were planning the summer after junior of high school to do this scheduling together, just talking constantly. And so I talked to him on a Friday night. He surprisingly had signed up for mountain climbing, and he was, if anything, a little less coordinated than I was. So very surprising. And then tragically, he's up there practicing and falls, hits his head. And so that Sunday, I was called by the headmaster and told that Kent had died, which, I'd never had anybody young just, disappear like that. And this was my best friend. So that was a tough thing. I didn't end up being able to speak at his service.
Yeah, tell us more about that. I mean, you'd said that he had remarks all prepared, and then you just froze it in your seat, right?
Yeah, they have a chapel, which if you go back in time, there were actually religious things that happened in that building, but the school's gotten increasingly secular, but they still call it the chapel. Anyway, it still had pews in there at this time, and so they did a really great service. And Paul and his parents also didn't speak because they and that was actually went through my head that, okay, this is terrible for me, but for Kent's parents this is even worse. And so going over to his house, and they say, okay, take any of his stuff you want to take and things like that. It changed their lives in this terrible way. And now at the school, there's actually an auditorium that Paul and I named after Kent. And at the end of the book, I run into his dad and talk about what a shame it was that Kent wasn't around to, participate in all the incredible things that we had been set up to probably go do.
Yeah, no, I mean, what you said was so meaningful. Who am I going to eat lunch with, right? That's what you think about when you go to school. Who am I going to talk to at the end of the day? I mean, that's when you know what an emotional thing this has been. But how incredible, when any of you read the book, you will see this is the memorial for Kent that you were not able to deliver that day because he comes alive. You really care about this kid. I felt so sad when he died. Anyways, just talk a little bit more about those Boy Scout expeditions that you did. It seemed to me that was way out of your comfort zone to be doing those on these huge long hikes, but you had a way somehow, and it was a really scary hike to think.
Yeah, when I was growing up, it was always interesting to have different groups, like a group of kids. We had families that would get together in the summer. Then there was this Boy Scout group I would do hiking with, and there was the school group, the church group, and you would be a little different. And, it's almost like you're trying out different ways of fitting in. This hiking group, I really enjoyed. I was never good at hiking. That was not why I went hiking. It was to hang out and have this camaraderie. And we were given immense freedom. We actually did fairly challenging hikes, whenever we would vote on do we take the short route or the long route, everybody knew my position.
Short route.
And so at the start of the book, I recall one time on the Olympic Peninsula, very cold and wet, clearly we should have taken the short route. And they voted me down again. And so I, had to distract myself. And I thought about writing a piece of software, so-called basic interpreter.
This is what they normally think about when they're walking in the woods.
And there's a piece of that is quite complicated. I was trying to figure out how I would write that. And it was actually a pretty good day because I finally, after 5 hours of hiking, had it all figured out in my head. And it amazingly, 3 years later, when the miracle of the computer on the chip, the microcomputer comes along, and Paul Allen, who I got after Kent's death, I called up Paul and we kind of re-engaged, and he helped me do the scheduling. And he and I would talk about how personal computers were going to be coming. Anyway, that software I wrote was very handy because then we have a few months to actually write the first basic interpreter, and I was able to benefit from all that thinking I'd done on the hike.
Oh, anyways, so girls come, and you join the drama club, and you actually are in a play, and you're in a play with a really popular young woman. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so my slowly developing socially skills were nowhere more worse than it when it comes to talking to girls. Because I was in charge of the school scheduling, I could decide for these multi-section courses who would be in my section. And so there were some great girls in my class. I didn't talk to them.
But you could look at them.
They were there. And so my senior year, the part of the time I was at school, I was in a play, Black Comedy. My co-star, Vicky, I really liked. She was great. And, I was afraid to ask her out. And I did ask her out, and she said she was waiting for someone else to ask her out, which was great because he was a cool guy, and he did ask her out. So anyway, that was a slow thing for me, although she was nice about it.
But tell him about how you broached this topic when you would call her on the phone.
Yeah, I mean,
You hear this?
I was completely, I wasn't sure what to say at all. So I said, okay, I've been just sitting here dialing the phone with my feet, and decided to call you. And, we have this prom coming, but I was very nervous, and that I'm sure that came across to her quite.
What I liked about the writing of the book is that you said, you decided you were going to finally ask out a girl, and then we wait like 10 more pages. I want to know what happened, and then you finally tell the story. But that's the way it should be when you're reading something. You want to be excited about what's coming next. So anyway, now let's get you out of Lakeside into Harvard. And it's what you remind me of when I think about you at Harvard is Teddy Roosevelt, because he interrupted his professors all the time. He had excess energy. He had almost a photographic memory. He had hyper focus. He was curious, and his passion just got him in trouble. So tell the story of the time when you almost were sent before, or you were sent before the administrative board at Harvard, and there was a possibility of expulsion from the school.
Yeah, so as Paul and I are getting all of this software experience, he's been reading about putting the computer on the chip and showing that to me, and saying, okay, these things are going to double in performance. They're going to exponentially improve. And I said, that's crazy. I mean, exponential improvement, that means computing will be free, essentially. And he says, look, that's what's going to happen. And so as I go off to Harvard, the idea that there's a revolution that's going to happen, I have that in mind. In fact, I helped Paul get a job in Boston so he can be there to bug me about, when should we start a company to be in at the start of the revolution. He wants to do a personal computer. I say, no, we're just going to do software. And so he's back there, and it's a cold Boston winter, and the very first kit computer, although it's very limited, that's the earliest personal computer, is on the cover of this magazine. He buys that at Harvard Square, brings it, and he says, we've got to get out there now. And so I take Paul into the computer area with one other person who's helping us, and we write this basic interpreter. And nobody's there, nobody else is using this computer at night. There's not like some limited resource. But then they hire somebody who looks at who's been using this computer, which actually belongs to the government, and they say, okay, there's a sophomore who's been using 60% of the computer time. And it's supposed to be used by graduate students and everything. So they decide to look into this. One of the people who looked into it thought I was a bit sarcastic with my answers, and they didn't understand that this was this glorious project we were working on,
which will change the country.
And so this is one of the times where I called my dad and said, boy, I might be in real trouble here because I used this computer time, and I guess the rules weren't clear about what you could and couldn't do. He talked to them and sort of said, okay, I hope you have a fair process. Anyway, it came out okay in that the range of possibilities included some pretty severe punishment, but they kind of slapped me on the wrist and admonished me for bringing non-students into the computer room, and that was fair. I hadn't gotten permission to bring Paul, who was not a Harvard student, in, and I put that program in the public domain, and I stopped using it. But it was a scary episode.
But tell about how later you found out that one of the people, the professors, had said good things about you and defended you, the one who you had thought you were a pain.
Yeah, so the head of the computer science department, this guy, Tom Cheatham, he liked doing his work. And I would come into his office and enthuse about these cheap computers and what they would do and all that. And it really didn't grab him. He was working on his work and thought I was, at least way ahead of myself when I said a computer on every desk and in every home, and that the software would be this key thing. So anyway, he and I got this agreement that I would just leave things for him to sign with his secretary, and if he would sign it, I wouldn't bother him. And I thought, God, now when I got into this disciplinary thing, gosh, that guy doesn't really like me because he doesn't like meeting with me. He just signs things just so he doesn't have to meet with me. So it was actually fairly touching. The researcher who worked with me on this goes and gets all the material, including the statement that Professor Cheatham had put in, where it was super nice. He said it would be a travesty to anyway damage this amazing kid's academic career. And I wouldn't have guessed in a million years he would have said that. And he and I never discussed it. The whole time at Harvard, he's still just signing whatever I put in front of him. So anyway, I had a better relationship with him than I realized. He was quite kind in this crisis that he helped me get through.
And you were sad that you didn't get a chance to talk to him after you'd found this out. He was already dead.
He had passed away, yeah.
Oh, wow. Anyway, with the benefit of hindsight, though, what gave you the confidence, or was it necessity because you had to be part of the revolution to leave Harvard? That's a big deal.
Yeah, the juncture that I get scared at is absolutely not dropping out, because dropping out, I have like $20,000 in the bank from various computer projects, so I'm not going to starve. Mm-hmm. And, at first I'm just working with people like me. And, if this thing fails, I can go back to Harvard. I was just on leave. They don't shut the door behind you when you leave. You can return. The thing that was scary to me was when I started hiring people who had families. Oh. And they would expect their paycheck to cash. And so every day I would do the math and say, okay, if no customer pays me for a year, can I pay these people their salary? This is my the original employee group, so I'm on the left, Paul Allen's on the front right there, kind of a motley looking crew, and their lives depended on my having done the financial math correctly. And so I was intimidated by that. So I was a little bit schizophrenic that I wanted to hire as many people as I could and write a ton of software. But I never wanted to get ahead of myself. In fact, two of the companies that I most admired, a company called Wayne Computer.
I remember that.
They did memory, word processing, mini computers, just unbelievably innovative. They went bankrupt when I'm at Harvard. And Digital Equipment Corporation effectively, which had done all this great work, including most of the computers I worked on, they eventually got messed up. So I had this notion that, boy, you have to be careful because if you miss a turn in the road, you might go down. And so, I wanted to hire people, but I didn't ever want to run out of money.
So how was it that you developed, the social skills to become a leader? I mean, you had to be a leader, and that's a different set of skills than you'd ordinarily developed. I mean, that requires humility and empathy and accountability and resilience and all those things.
Well, initially,
but you did become a leader.
I had to. Initially, I'm pretty good at leading people like me. Now that's a fairly narrow set of people. But look at that picture again. Those are not your most diverse behavioral style people. Okay, Andrea and Marla, who's the wife of Steve there. Okay, they didn't write code. Everyone else, but the two women in that picture are extremely good software programmers. And I knew how to manage software programmers. You tell them to work all the time. You look over their code and tell them when it's not good. But then I had to, do marketing and sales. And it is weird, the confidence that I brought to that, partly because I had this naive view that if you understand math and software, how hard can marketing and sales and finance and those things be? Which is partly true, not completely. And the other thing I was learning is that these programmers, actually being a good manager of programmers is almost negatively correlated to how good of a programmer you are. That is, the very, very best individual performers, you'd think they could take their fungible IQ and manage other people. But in fact, a little bit they've been spoiled. They don't want to. And so figuring out, okay, who's going to manage these people and how do we bring these other skill sets in? And I have to say, although, at the end of this book, we move up to Seattle. So Microsoft is still pretty small. In this book, I meet Steve Ballmer at Harvard. And then very early in the history of Microsoft, I get him to drop out of Stanford Business School. He's 1 year into that because I knew that the things that I didn't have in terms of how quickly we needed to grow and hire people and really have people thinking. And then we actually got some adults to come work for the company.
Was that hard?
Well, yes, because we didn't know why are they going to come work for us. But eventually we found people who loved our revolution and yet brought really good skills. Mike Maples just passed away 2 weeks ago, a guy named John Shirley who's still living. We had about 4 or 5 adults that joined the team and knew, okay, it's our revolution, but you guys helped steer this crazy rocket that we're on. And I have to say that was fun. But picking, okay, which products are we going to do? How are we going to do them? How do we hire people? I always, knew that I needed to lead. I wasn't going to have somebody else run the company. And so we start in 1975, and then I'm the full-time CEO until 2000.
Okay, so you, with all of this historic success, you, like many of us, are haunted by a recurring dream, a dream that jolts you out of your sleep at night. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm amazed at how many other people have a similar dream. I think you admitted you have a similar dream, and I haven't I've signed up for all these classes. It's exam time. I'm not sure which building it's in, which textbooks I was supposed to get. And I had this way of procrastinating. The courses I would sign up for, I would wait till what was called reading period, 20 days at the end, which is a weird thing. And I would just do all the work then. I wouldn't go to any of the classes because I was going to other classes anyway. And it does create a lot of anxiety that just because you're good at being obsessed with something, it's hard to direct yourself to be obsessed with the right thing. And so I remember that ninth grade, the reason I actually got that B was there were these Tarzan books in my room that sometimes when I go down there, I'd read those instead of working on my work. But by the time I got to college, I was pretty good at directing it, but it still creates this highly anxious dream that I've finally gone too far, waited too long, and I'm going to be found out.
Yeah, my dream, and I was always a nerdy student, but I somehow had forgotten to go to the class, and I hadn't any of the books, and I didn't know where the exam room was. But the worst part of my dream was that I dreamed that I was running to the exam room, but I'd forgotten to get dressed. So the only thing that was lucky was I woke up before I nakedly ran into the exam room.
Oh, wow.
But it's crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's many of you out there have had a similar dream. Anyone that's gone to school, it's a crazy thing. We got to stop it in the middle. So I know this book is part of a trilogy, and I can't wait to read the next two books that are coming. But what I really want to talk about a little bit tonight, so everybody can know, is the emotional intelligence it took not only for you to become a great leader at Microsoft, but at that young age of 45 to make that decision to retire and start a wholly new purpose in your life. And you talk about the day when you realized, when you were giving a speech, that you'd found the rest of your life's purpose. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so in the 1990s, I'm spending time with Melinda, who I married in 1994. I've gotten to know Warren Buffett.
Oh, he's the best.
Who's counseling me on all sorts of things, huge influence on me. The adult, other than my parents, who to this day, I mean, I talk to him all the time, although he doesn't travel as much as he used to. And so the idea of philanthropy in the 90s, I'm thinking about it. Warren has a Fortune magazine cover where he says, you shouldn't leave too much money to your kids. So I've got that in my head. And, so I'm reading about Ford and Rockefeller and a little bit, because the software thing has been so incredible, I'm thinking, boy, is this giving it away thing going to be very anticlimactic in terms of scale of impact, because there's existing philanthropists. They've probably picked all the really good things, and I'll just be kind of off on the margin, not having much impact. And, I start asking, okay, why do children die? What is malaria? And all these things. And so in the 90s, through some early grants, before we actually formally create the foundation, this whole global health community I get to know. And I'm sort of aghast, but also weirdly excited to realize that taking care of children in poor countries, like avoiding them dying of malaria or measles or many other things, that the world's not, the market system and even the philanthropy isn't doing that. So that global health work and some work in education become the big focus. I thought the education stuff, okay, it's in a very stable country with clear outcomes. We'll make a lot of progress in that, which, the actual improvement in the average U.S. education for the whole field, forget our stuff specifically, hasn't improved. But in global health, miraculous things have happened, and it's up until about January 20th. But the progress of getting from 10 million children are dying every year down to 5 million.
Oh, can you imagine that? Saving 5 million children?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's not just us, but we're part of a movement which governments are, including the U.S. government, are a very big part of it. But so, amazingly, my first part of my life is I can't think of anybody who's ever luckier. The Microsoft part of my life, I can't think of anybody who was luckier. But now this third phase, which will be the third volume of giving the money away, is every bit as fun and kind of amazing, and more appropriate to the skill sets I have now that have taken me a long time to develop. It fits that I'm able to use what I did right, what I did wrong at Microsoft, and apply that to my full-time work now.
And it seems like your ability to hyper-focus comes in because you realized a toilet could make a huge difference, right? Could you tell them about that?
Well, yeah, I could talk for a couple hours about toilets. Sanitation, clean water. It turns out that's a very, very big deal. Society's had a few things like antibiotics, vaccines, but also sanitation. Cities became gigantic sources of disease, primarily because the water. There's a guy named John Snow in London who figures out that if he closes off this one pump, this cholera epidemic, which is killing all this, people will stop. And so dirty water kills almost as many kids as mosquitoes do. And, how do you stop that? Well, you make sure there's reasonable toilets. And okay, how do you have a revolution in toilets? We probably don't have time for that today.
But you've been very hands-on, it seems to me, in this whole process. I mean, you go there and you're talking to them and you're figuring this out.
Yeah, no, the thing throughout my life is that I'm a student. That's what I love being. And so, if I'm getting into a new topic, I get to meet people who know that topic very well. I get to have a team of people. If I'm confused, I send email late at night saying, explain to me how we're going to do this. And so I can learn knowing that these people will straighten me out if I'm getting confused. So yes, it's been a great joy to learn about all these different diseases. And, when the pandemic came, we happened to have a lot of vaccine expertise. In fact, the greatest vaccine expertise that was not inside a pharmaceutical company was at the Gates Foundation, because a lot of what we've done is invent new vaccines. Some that more controversial than maybe it should be. Anyway, invent new vaccines and make sure they get very, very cheap. And so yes, I wouldn't enjoy my work unless there wasn't something that might succeed or fail, and that I'm being challenged to understand and work with amazing people on new areas.
So you saw the future once before. You had a vision of it. When you look at the future now, do you feel optimistic? What do you worry about? What technology has done, what it can do still?
Absolutely. When I was young, the thing that was incredibly worrisome was nuclear war. And that's still there. The current generation has sort of, because we've taken care of it, it's like, oh, that must be completely taken care of. No, we put a lot of effort into it. We had various treaties, so that's there. There's polarization. There's the next pandemic that we're not ready for. There's bioterrorism is a type of pandemic that's intentionally caused, which the chance of that goes up over time. And then there's AI. AI is something that will be wondrous in terms of the specific problems it can help solve. You can say it's the child of the digital revolution. The digital revolution is computing becomes free, storage, communications, it all essentially is free. And so that gives you the internet, the mobile phone. What started now is that intelligence, which is scarce, like, okay, do we have enough great teachers, great doctors? Do we have them in the inner city? Do we have them in poor countries? It's a scarce thing that you can't imagine. Well, how do you get more? Well, intelligence will become essentially free. And that's more of a profound change than even computing becoming free. And we're at the early stage of it. And people can still argue about, is it 5 years or 20 years for any particular form of this, including making it super reliable, which it is not yet. So yes, I am very optimistic. We're gaining understandings of malnutrition. We'll have vaccines for HIV, TB, and malaria, and even rich world things, even aging itself, Alzheimer's.
Yay!
Our understanding, even before AI comes along, of these fundamental scientific things has been advancing at a good pace. And now AI will jump in and actually accelerate that. So it's this weird paradox that any problem you can name, like, oh, I want a personal tutor or I want better medical diagnosis, AI, you should feel good that it's going to help solve that. But it changes the framework of society in terms of how the job market shifts, or bad people take this tool and use it to negative ends. So this is the most, the best time to be alive, the most exciting time to be alive. We're making it maybe more exciting than we should, but we get to deal with that. But yes, I am very optimistic, but now I have more footnotes than just nuclear war. I have, 4 or 5 footnotes: polarization, bioterrorism, AI, that, my generation didn't solve. And so we left some really juicy, hard problems for the next generation.
And I think the one you mentioned before that's been difficult of all is education. That's the most central thing, it seems to me, in this country. I mean, I read a study recently that showed 75% of the kids who are in elementary school are excited and curious. By high school, only 25% love school. And how do we create in that school system that sense of exploration, the curiosity the kids are born with, and not let it die, and let them explore things like you did? And that's going to take great teachers. That's going to take paying our teachers better and making them more great part of our country somehow. But anyway, we're coming near the end. I would love to talk forever. But final question: what do you hope the readers will take away from this story that you've given to us?
Well, my sense of gratitude to my parents and friends and sisters, a sense that things that look abnormal, Malcolm Gladwell talks about 10,000 hours, and how if you are just a little better, then you're encouraged to do more. And so over a period of years, it almost feels like you come from a different universe. And, I was a tiny bit better at mathematics, but people said to me, "Oh, you're good at mathematics." And I was like, "Am I? Wow, okay, I'm going to do mathematics." And the kid who was just, 10% slower than me said, "No, he's better than me. I'm going to go do football." And then software got into that same thing. And so it is pretty incredible, particularly if you have a young mind, and particularly if it ends up concentrating in a intense way. Then even by the time you're 20, you're really well positioned. Now, many people, it won't be when they're 20, it'll be when they're 25 or 30, because it won't be such rapid progression. But the idea you can take something that, if you really enjoy working on it and you find ways of pushing yourself and getting feedback. I was not just writing software. Some of the best software people in the world were there.
Yeah.
And the way my mom had brought in adults, I could kind of talk to those adults, and they got a kick out of saying, "No, you did that wrong and that wrong." And it was fun for them, and it was fun for me. And so I do think the joy of learning hopefully comes through. The fact that a kid who's a little not abnormal, hopefully you try and understand that, and maybe you're able to tap into it as a strength. So I don't, at the end of the book, there's not like some 10, things that you need to go and do.
Well, there's something wonderful at the end of the book, and I'd love to read from what seems to me a really moving paragraph. "For most of my life," he says, "I've been focused on what's ahead. Even now, most days, I'm working on hope for breakthroughs that may not happen for years, if at all. As I grow older, though, I find myself looking back more and more. It's a marvel of adulthood to realize that when you strip away all the years and all the learning, much of who you are was there from the start. In many ways, I'm still that 8-year-old kid sitting at Gammy's dining table as she deals the cards. I feel the same sense of anticipation, a kid alert and wanting to make sense of it all. And with that, his book comes full circle from beginning to end. There's an old saying that I've heard that the best men retain the qualities of the little boy in them, the sense of wonder, the intense curiosity, the desire to explore. Indeed, in that bright, precocious, freckled-faced boy that you were brought to life in this book, it's clear that that little boy is still in the man who created one of the greatest companies and one of our greatest foundations. And now, through all the stories you have told, your grandmother, your parents, your sisters, your schoolmates, they will all be living in our hearts and minds. What a gift you have given to all of us. I thank you on behalf of everyone here. Wow. Great.
Thank you.